every day, behind the tall iron gates of a luxurious mansion, a young boy endured unspeakable cruelty at the hands of his own father. No one noticed, no one cared. But one day, something changed. The family's retired canine, once silent, once forgotten, did something no one saw coming. And nothing would ever be the same again. From the outside, the Hartman estate looked like something out of a magazine. Tall columns, a driveway that curved through sculpted gardens, and a fleet of luxury cars always gleaming under the California sun. To the world, Gregory Hartman was a brilliant entrepreneur, gruff, sure, but successful. His name carried weight in business circles, and his charm at charity galas masked any rough edges. But beyond the facade, behind the heavy double doors, the truth was far from glamorous. 12-year-old Eli Hartman lived in a silence so thick it could suffocate. He had learned not to cry, not to speak unless spoken to, and above all, not to resist. Because resistance only made things worse. His father had rules, brutal ones, and if Eli disobeyed, even accidentally, the punishments were swift and merciless. The staff said nothing. Most were too afraid. Some had worked for the Hartmans for decades and convinced themselves it wasn't their place. Others simply left after a few weeks, whispering rumors that no one outside ever took seriously. But there was one witness who never turned away. Ranger, a retired police K9, now nearly 10 years old, who had been given to the family after Gregory made a hefty donation to the department. He wasn't expected to do much anymore, just laze in the sun, eat expensive kibble, and occasionally pose for photos that made the Hartmans look even more benevolent. But Ranger was still sharp, still watching, and most importantly, he was still loyal. Not to Gregory, to Eli. From the moment the boy first reached out with trembling fingers to stroke his fur, Ranger had known. Animals have a way of sensing what people ignore, and what Ranger saw day after day was a child who was slipping away. And then, on one particular night, it all changed, because Gregory crossed a line, and Ranger refused to stay silent any longer. The Hartman mansion sat on a quiet hill overlooking the Pacific, surrounded by high fences, trimmed hedges, and cameras that never blinked. From the gates inward, the world changed into marble floors, oil paintings of ancestors, and a silence so perfect it almost felt hostile. Gregory Hartman demanded it that way. He was a tall man, with silver hair and a voice that never rose above a certain pitch. He didn't need to yell. A single glare could shut down an entire room. In public, he was always precise. Tailored suits, controlled gestures, and firm handshakes. He smiled when it was required. But at home, behind the walls, no one questioned. He shed the performance. At home, Gregory ruled. And his son, Eli. He was a prisoner with no bars, just routines, punishments, and silence. The boy had his own wing of the house, complete with books, instruments, even a private tutor who came twice a week. But none of it mattered. Because Eli wasn't allowed to speak at meals, he wasn't allowed to ask questions, and above all, he wasn't allowed to disobey. Most of the time, he didn't even know what the rules were. They shifted like sand, changing with his father's moods. A dropped glass, a look that lingered too long, a wrong answer in math, any of it could lead to the belt. Or worse. The bruises were always hidden. His father wasn't stupid. No marks on the face, never broken skin, just deep, dark patches on ribs, thighs, or the underside of his arm, places that wouldn't show when Eli was paraded at fundraisers or made to smile in family portraits. But someone did notice. Ranger. The dog had once served with distinction in a K9 unit, sniffing out explosives, chasing fugitives, standing in the line of fire. His record was flawless, but now he was considered retired, a gesture of goodwill, a photo-op mascot. The media called him the hero dog now enjoying luxury, but luxury meant nothing to him. He missed the clarity of purpose, and somehow he found it again in Eli. At first, it was the little things. The way the boy's shoulders flinched when footsteps echoed down the hallway, the way he held his breath when Gregory entered a room, the nights he curled on the floor beside Ranger's bed instead of sleeping in his own, and the way he never touched his piano anymore. Eli used to play it when his mother was alive, but after the car crash that took her and turned Gregory even colder, music became another forbidden thing. Gregory didn't like reminders of softness. One morning, Eli sat on the edge of the back patio, his knees pulled to his chest, while Ranger laid beside him, head on the boy's thigh. They stayed there for hours, unmoving. When the cook came outside to call Eli for breakfast, he didn't answer. She tried again, then gave up and returned inside. Ranger never left his side. Later that day, Gregory found a book left on the floor of the library. It was Eli's. Without a word, he grabbed the boy by the wrist and dragged him into the hallway. There were no raised voices, only the dull, rhythmic thud of pain delivered in precision. Ranger stood at the top of the stairs, watching, his ears lowered, his body tense, but he did not move. Not yet. He had seen this before, and like any trained canine, he waited for the command, but it never came. That night, Eli didn't eat. He didn't cry either. He just laid on the carpet in his room, staring at the ceiling, with Ranger pressed tightly against his side. The dog didn't sleep. He kept his eyes on the door. He listened. He remembered. And the next time Gregory raised his hand, Ranger wouldn't wait for a command. Because that night, something in his eyes had changed. Something primal, something ready. And just 2 days later, when Gregory stepped forward again with that same belt in hand, Ranger did something so fast, so fierce and so precise that no one in that house would ever forget the sound it made. It was a Thursday afternoon when the inevitable happened. Eli was in the study, working through a stack of assignments his tutor had left, when he heard the heavy tread of his father's shoes echoing down the hallway. His stomach tightened. Instinctively, he lowered his eyes and braced himself, muscles coiling with the memory of every previous punishment. Gregory entered the room with quiet purpose. In his hand was the old leather belt, the one that Eli feared the most. He barely spoke, just motioned with a sharp tilt of his chin for the boy to stand. Eli obeyed, as he always did, but this time, something changed. Ranger was there. He had followed Eli into the study, and now lay curled by the bookshelf, eyes half closed but fully alert. The moment Gregory lifted the belt, Ranger's ears pricked forward, body stiffening. His training was deep in his bones, but so was something more ancient, the need to protect. Gregory swung the belt in a warning arc. "Do you understand why you're being punished?" he asked, his voice cold. Eli nodded, though he didn't. "Speak up." "For leaving the book out," Eli whispered, his hands shaking. Gregory frowned, annoyed by the boy's trembling. "That's right. Actions have consequences." He drew back his arm, and then, in less than a heartbeat, Ranger was on his feet. No growl, no bark, just a blur of fur and muscle. He lunged, intercepting Gregory's arm with a movement so swift that the man barely had time to react. The belt dropped to the floor as Ranger clamped his teeth, not into flesh but into the thick leather itself, yanking it from Gregory's grasp with a force that nearly pulled him off balance. Gregory stumbled back, furious. "What the? Ranger, heel! I said heel!" But Ranger stood between Eli and his father, teeth bared, fur raised along his spine. He didn't snap, didn't attack. He just held his ground, blocking Gregory's path, his gaze never wavering from the man's face. For the first time in years, Gregory faltered. He took a step back. "Stupid mutt," he spat, his voice trembling with rage and disbelief. He reached for the belt, but Ranger planted himself even more firmly in front of Eli, emitting a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Eli's breath caught. He had never heard Ranger make that sound before, not even in nightmares. There was something final about it, a warning, one that was not to be ignored. Gregory hesitated, his pride battling with a flicker of fear. He turned and left the room, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavier than any blow. Eli collapsed to his knees, pressing his face into Ranger's fur, his body shaking. But this time, he cried, silent, racking sobs of both relief and terror. Ranger licked his cheek once, then rested his head on the boy's shoulder. For the first time in as long as Eli could remember, he felt safe. The next morning, Gregory ignored both of them. He went about his routine with rigid formality, but there was something in his eyes, resentment mixed with caution. He watched Ranger carefully, keeping his distance. The rest of the staff noticed, too. Whispers began circulating. Maybe, just maybe. The spell of fear was cracking. But Gregory was not a man to surrender control easily. He called the family lawyer, then the head of security. He wanted the dog removed. "It's a liability," he insisted. "I don't care what the department says, get rid of it." Word spread quickly, and that evening, Eli overheard a conversation between two maids in the kitchen. "They're sending Ranger away tomorrow," one whispered. "He's going to the shelter." Eli's heart plummeted. He ran to his room, shutting the door, clutching Ranger close. He knew what it meant. Without Ranger, he would be alone. The only creature who had ever truly protected him gone, and in that moment, a new fear took root. But Ranger, he just looked up at Eli with those steady brown eyes, as if promising this wasn't over. And that night, for the first time, Eli made a plan. Because if Ranger was leaving, Eli would do the unthinkable. He would leave with him, even if it meant risking everything. Eli didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed with Ranger curled at his feet, heart pounding so loudly he was sure someone would hear. Every time the house creaked, he flinched. He had made up his mind. If Ranger was leaving, he was leaving too. No more waiting for things to get better. No more praying for someone to notice. Just before dawn, Eli crept out of bed and dressed in silence. He stuffed a few clothes and his favorite book into a backpack, then paused to take his mother's locket from the nightstand. It was all he had left of her, a small silver heart on a chain, still warm from being clutched in restless hands every night. He opened the bedroom door, wincing at the soft click of the latch. Ranger was instantly alert, tail wagging once as if to say, "I'm ready." The dog followed Eli on silent paws through the dark corridors, past the rooms where the staff slept, past the grand staircase that creaked with every step. At the kitchen, Eli grabbed some bread and a bottle of water, slipping them into his bag. He hesitated, then scribbled a note on the back of a receipt. "Don't look for me. Don't hurt Ranger. I'm safe." He left it on the counter, hoping someone would read it before his father found out. Outside, the morning air was cold and sharp, biting through Eli's thin sweater. The estate's iron gate was locked and monitored by cameras. He didn't have a key code, but he knew something the adults didn't. On the west side, where the gardeners rarely went, a section of the fence had rusted through behind a thick hedge. He'd found it months earlier while hiding from Gregory. Now heart-pounding, he slipped through the brush, knees and elbows stinging as he crawled. Ranger followed easily, squeezing his big body through with only a soft grunt. Once outside, they stood for a moment, staring back at the mansion. The house looked different from here, smaller, fragile. Eli didn't allow himself to hesitate. He turned, started walking. Ranger padded silently by his side, never glancing back. They made it as far as the main road before Eli stopped, uncertain. He had no plan, just desperation. Where could they go? He didn't know anyone outside the estate. No friends, no family nearby. He remembered vague stories from his mother about a park on the far side of town, a place she'd taken him when he was small. "Let's go, Ranger," he whispered, voice trembling. They walked for what felt like hours, the city waking around them. The sun rose, painting the sky in pink and gold. Eli's legs began to ache. His shoes pinched. The bread in his bag felt useless against the cold knot in his stomach. By midday, they reached the edge of the park. Ranger kept close, ever alert, his gaze scanning every stranger, every passing car. Eli found a quiet spot beneath a cluster of trees and sat down, pulling Ranger close. He tried to eat, but nothing tasted right. He tried to think, but fear crowded out every thought. He didn't know what to do next, he just knew he couldn't go back. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, chaos erupted. Gregory awoke to an empty house, staff running from room to room. The note on the kitchen counter was thrust into his hands. His face darkened as he read it. "Find him," he snapped at the security chief. "Now!" Police were called. Descriptions were given. The city's security cameras were checked. Within hours, an alert was sent out. Missing child was accompanied by a large German shepherd. Approached with caution. Eli and Ranger were alone, but not invisible. As dusk fell, the temperature dropped and the park emptied. Eli shivered, holding Ranger close, tears sliding down his cheeks as the sky faded to deep blue. Streetlights flickered on, one by one. He knew he couldn't sleep here. Someone would find them. He remembered a church at the end of the street, its doors always open. Maybe there, just for a night. They walked together through the dark, Ranger pressing so close, Eli nearly tripped over him. As they reached the church steps, a woman in a heavy coat paused, looking down at them. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Eli hesitated, unsure whether to trust. Ranger pressed closer, eyes never leaving the woman. But just as she knelt to offer help, headlights swept across the street and a black SUV screeched to a stop. Gregory had found them. He stepped out, face twisted with rage. "Eli, get in the car, now!" Eli froze, breath caught in his chest. Ranger growled, low, ready. And in that split second, everything hung in the balance, because this time, Eli knew he wouldn't go quietly, and neither would Ranger. The world seemed to freeze as Gregory stepped onto the sidewalk. Every muscle in his body coiled with anger and authority. The woman in the heavy coat straightened, instinctively placing herself between Eli and the imposing man. Her eyes flicked from Gregory's expensive watch to the raw desperation in Eli's face. "Is this your son?" she asked, voice calm but wary. Gregory nodded sharply, voice icy. "He's run away." "I'll handle it." Eli's breath came in short, panicked bursts. He glanced at Ranger, whose hackles were up, teeth bared in a silent snarl. The woman put a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder, lowering herself to his level. "Are you all right, sweetheart? Did something happen at home?" Gregory's face hardened. "That's none of your business. Step aside." But the woman didn't move. Instead, she pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed 911, her thumb steady on the screen. "I think it is my business," she replied. "He's scared. The dog's protecting him. And you're scaring both of them." Ranger's growl deepened, rumbling in his chest. Gregory took a step forward, his voice a harsh whisper meant only for Eli. "Get up now, or you'll regret it." For the first time, Eli didn't move. He stayed close to Ranger, pressing his face into the thick fur, feeling the dog's steady heartbeat against his cheek. The woman's hand tightened on his shoulder. The church doors opened and a priest appeared on the steps, taking in the scene with a quick, assessing glance. More people gathered, passers-by, drawn by the escalating tension. The SUV's headlights illuminated the tableau. A trembling boy, a dog ready to defend, a stranger standing firm, and a father boiling with rage. Gregory realized the crowd was growing. He adjusted his tone, faking concern. "My son is special. He gets confused sometimes. The dog is just overprotective. Please, let me take him home." But the woman wasn't fooled. "Then you'll have no problem waiting for the police," she said, her voice steely. In the seconds that followed, everything seemed to slow. Gregory lunged forward, intent on grabbing Eli's arm, but Ranger sprang up, planting himself squarely between father and son. He didn't bite, but he made it clear that one wrong move would have consequences. The crowd gasped, phones raised, some recording, others dialing for help. Gregory froze, realizing his usual intimidation was powerless here. Eli, trembling, looked up at the woman. "Please don't let him take me. He hurts me. He wants to take Ranger away, please." The words hung in the air like thunder. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the priest spoke, voice gentle but commanding. "Everyone stays where they are. The police are on their way." Gregory's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. You don't know what goes on in my house." A man in the crowd stepped forward, his own dog on a leash. "That's exactly the problem. No one does. Not until now." Blue and red lights flashed at the end of the street, sirens wailing as two squad cars pulled up. Officers jumped out, hands raised in a practiced calm. "Everyone back!" "Sir, step away from the child and the dog." Gregory hesitated, rage and disbelief warring across his face. "He's my son," he shouted. "He's confused, that's all." But the officers didn't buy it. They separated him from Eli and Ranger, pulling him aside to question him. The woman stayed with Eli, her presence an anchor in the chaos. Eli clung to Ranger, sobbing now, years of silence breaking all at once. The officers took his statement gently, one of them kneeling to eye level. "Has your father ever hurt you, Eli?" Eli nodded, the truth finally out. A medic examined him right there, noting old bruises and the fear in his eyes. The crowd watched, some teary, some angry, all witnessing the end of Gregory's control. The officers placed Gregory in handcuffs, reading him his rights as he sputtered threats and denials. The illusion shattered, once and for all. But as the police prepared to take Eli and Ranger to safety, a staff member from the mansion rushed up, frantic. "He has lawyers. He'll fight this. They'll say Eli is unstable, that the dog is dangerous." The woman in the coat, still at Eli's side, looked the officer straight in the eye. "Not if we all tell what we saw tonight." And as the doors of the squad car closed, taking Gregory away, Eli looked out at the crowd, seeing for the first time not just strangers, but protectors. But somewhere in the shadows, a pair of eyes watched with a cold as calculating glare. Gregory's lawyer had arrived, and the battle was far from over, because sometimes escaping the monster is only the beginning, and the real fight for freedom happens in the light, not in the dark. The police station was cold, its fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving. Eli sat in a plastic chair, knees drawn up, Ranger curled protectively at his feet. Every time a door opened or a voice echoed down the corridor, Eli jumped. He was free of the mansion, but not of fear, not yet. The officers were kind, but their questions were endless. Did his father ever hit him with an object? How often? Where were the bruises? Did anyone else know? Eli answered in a flat, quiet voice, always glancing down at Ranger for reassurance. The dog never left his side, tail curled over Eli's sneakers, eyes always watchful. The woman from the church, her name was Mrs. Rodriguez, stayed close. She signed paperwork, provided her phone number, and never once tried to leave Eli alone. "You're safe now," she kept saying. But Eli struggled to believe it. Safe was a word that sounded nice. He didn't know what it felt like. Outside, news vans already clustered near the police station. Someone must have leaked the story. Runaway millionaire's son saved by retired K9. And the media storm began. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust at officers. Eli saw his father's name scrolling across a TV in the waiting room. Gregory Hartman, accused of child abuse, but he also saw words that made his stomach twist. High-profile attorney, family disputes, allegations denied. Mrs. Rodriguez watched the coverage and squeezed his hand. "Don't worry about them, tell the truth. That's all that matters." But even as she spoke, an officer returned with a grave expression. "Eli, your father's lawyer is already at the courthouse. They're filing motions to get you back, arguing you were confused, traumatized, that the dog is dangerous and can't stay with you. It'll be a fight." Eli's chest tightened. "Are they going to take Ranger away?" The officer knelt in front of him. "Not if we can help it, he protected you. We're putting in a request for an emergency protection order for both you and the dog." Eli nodded numbly, hugging Ranger tighter. The hours passed. Eli was interviewed by a child psychologist who spoke gently and never pushed. He showed the bruises. He spoke, haltingly, of the punishments, of how Ranger had stopped his father that day. The psychologist made careful notes and told the officers Eli was credible. His trauma was real. That night, Eli was taken to a foster home, Mrs. Rodriguez at his side, Ranger permitted to come with him by special order. The house was small, cluttered with books and the smell of soup. The foster mother, Mrs. Green, welcomed them both with a tired smile. "We'll keep you safe until the judge decides," she promised, but Eli barely slept. Every car that passed outside, every dog that barked, jolted him awake. He dreamed of the mansion, of Gregory's cold eyes, of the belt snapping through the air. But each time, he would reach out, find Ranger's warm body beside him, and breathe just a little easier. In the days that followed, social workers visited, lawyers called, reporters tried to get interviews. Gregory remained in jail for 2 nights, but his lawyers worked relentlessly, painting Eli as unstable, suggesting that Ranger was a threat to public safety. An emergency custody hearing was scheduled. Everything would come down to the judge's decision. Mrs. Rodriguez testified for Eli. So did the priest from the church, the officer who'd taken his statement, and even Mrs. Green. They all described what they'd seen: a frightened boy, a dog who intervened, a father who lost control in public. But Gregory's legal team counted every point. They submitted glossy photos of the mansion, letters from character witnesses, even video clips of Eli at family events, always silent, always well-dressed. "He's a shy child," Gregory's lawyer insisted. "His father was strict, but never abusive. This is a misunderstanding." Eli was never asked to speak in court. The lawyers said it was to protect him, but it felt like another form of silence. Through it all, Ranger stayed at his side. In the quiet moments, Eli would wrap his arms around the dog's neck and whisper fears he couldn't voice to anyone else. "What if they make me go back? What if they take you away?" Ranger just pressed closer, steady as stone. The day before the hearing, Mrs. Rodriguez sat with Eli on the porch of the foster home. "No matter what happens," she said gently, "you're not alone. You have people who believe you now. And Ranger isn't just a pet. He's proof that you were never imagining things." Eli nodded, but his stomach churned, because he knew his father's power. He'd seen what money could do. And as the sun set on the eve of the trial, a black car slowed in front of the house. Inside, a face watched from the back seat. Gregory Hartman, out on bail. He hadn't lost yet. Tomorrow, in front of the judge, everything would be decided, and Eli had never been so terrified to lose the only friend who had ever truly saved him. The courthouse was nothing like the mansion. It was loud, cold, and full of strangers who spoke in hushed voices or barked orders across echoing corridors. Eli sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, knees bouncing, Ranger pressed tight against his side. Mrs. Rodriguez was there too, rubbing Eli's back in slow, steady circles. Inside, lawyers prepared their arguments. Gregory Hartman arrived in a tailored suit, flanked by two attorneys. He didn't look at Eli. He didn't look at Ranger. His face was blank, a mask polished by years of business and secrets. The bailiff called them in. Eli took a deep breath, holding Ranger's collar, and entered the wood-paneled room. Judge Walker presided, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She scanned the file in front of her, then looked at Eli. "We're here today to decide two urgent matters: the temporary custody of Eli Hartman and the status of the animal known as Ranger. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyers echoed. Gregory's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a deeply troubled child traumatized by his mother's death, subject to wild delusions. "Mr. Hartman has always provided a safe, loving home. The child's allegations are the product of confusion and grief, manipulated by outside influences. And the dog, Your Honor, he is a retired police K9. He is dangerous, unfit for a home with children, and attacked Mr. Hartman without provocation. For everyone's safety, both should be returned to the custody of their proper owner." The judge turned to Eli's attorney, who stood calmly. "Your Honor, Eli Hartman is a victim. Medical records confirm years of hidden injuries. Multiple witnesses, civilians and police corroborate that the boy ran away in fear. As for Ranger, far from being a danger, he is the reason Eli is alive today. When Mr. Hartman attempted to discipline his son with a leather belt, Ranger intervened and protected the boy without causing harm to anyone." Murmurs rippled through the court. Mrs. Rodriguez was called to the stand. She described what she'd seen: the fear in Eli's eyes, the dog's quiet protection, the public confrontation. "I've worked with children for 20 years, she said. "That boy wasn't confused, he was terrified." The police officer who found them testified as well, confirming Eli's injuries and the clear evidence of abuse. Even the priest from the church came, voice trembling but firm as he recalled seeing a father so intent on control that even a crowd of strangers couldn't make him pause. Gregory watched, jaw tight, as his lawyers countered every claim with affidavits from staff, some loyal by, some too afraid to say otherwise. They spoke of Eli's withdrawal, his unexplained bruises, as the result of childhood clumsiness. They insisted Ranger was unpredictable. They played a video from the mansion, Eli sitting at a piano, expression blank, Gregory's hand on his shoulder. "See, Your Honor, a loving family, just strict." The judge called a recess. Eli waited in the hall, arms around Ranger, unable to eat the sandwich Mrs. Green had packed for him. The weight of everything pressed down. What if Gregory won? What if he lost Ranger forever? He looked into the dog's eyes, finding there the same steady promise, "I will not leave you." Back in the courtroom, the judge asked for closing remarks. Eli's lawyer spoke last. "Your Honor, sometimes the bravest act is to speak the truth. Eli has done that, and so has Ranger, in the only way a dog can, by putting his own life between a child and harm. We ask that both boy and dog be allowed to stay together, somewhere safe." Judge Walker closed her folder and looked at Eli. "Eli, do you want to say anything?" Eli's voice shook, but he stood. "Please don't send me back. Please don't take Ranger away. He's the only one who ever protected me. He's my best friend." The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded, her face unreadable. "I will consider everything I've heard," she said. "I'll announce my ruling in the morning. For now, Eli and Ranger will remain together under protective custody." Gregory's jaw clenched, but he said nothing as the room emptied. That night, back at the foster home, Eli didn't sleep. He curled up with Ranger, staring at the ceiling, mind racing with every possible outcome. Outside, a storm broke. Thunder rattled the windows, and in the driveway, a black car idled in the rain. Someone was watching. And the decision that would shape the rest of Eli's life was only hours away. In the morning, the judge's words would determine everything: freedom, safety, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his K9. Dawn broke gray and slow over the city, rain still clinging to the windows of the foster home. Eli lay awake, every muscle taut with anticipation. Ranger sensed his anxiety, never leaving his side even for a moment. They waited in silence, the ticking of the clock louder than any words. At 8, Mrs. Green entered the room with a soft smile. "It's time, Eli. They'll announce the decision at the courthouse. Mrs. Rodriguez will drive us." Eli nodded, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He clung to Ranger as they rode through wet, empty streets. The courthouse was already buzzing. Reporters jostled for position, cameras ready, whispers filling the lobby. Eli tried not to look at them. All he could see was the door to the courtroom, the place where everything would be decided. Inside, Judge Walker took her seat, face solemn but kind. Gregory was there, flanked by lawyers, his expression a storm of controlled fury. The room stilled as the judge began. "I have reviewed all evidence and testimony," she said. "I have seen medical records, police reports, and heard from those who know Eli best. This is not a simple case. Money and status do not erase the scars of trauma." Gregory's lawyer shifted in his chair. Gregory clenched his jaw. The judge's gaze softened as she looked at Eli. "You have endured more than any child should. You spoke your truth, even when it was hard. You showed courage not just in running away, but in letting someone help you. And you, Ranger," she paused, as if the dog might understand. "You did what many adults failed to do. You protected the innocent." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Walker continued, "Effective immediately. I am granting Eli Hartman emergency protective custody. He will not return to his father's house. Furthermore, Ranger will remain by his side as a certified service animal. Any attempt to separate them without a court order is prohibited." Eli's breath whooshed from his chest. Gregory shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. He's my son." "I demand an appeal." The judge's gavel came down sharply. "You will sit down, Mr. Hartman. Any further outburst, and you will be removed from this court." Gregory's lawyers tried to recover, arguing for supervised visitation, another psychological evaluation. The judge cut them off. "Mr. Hartman, your son needs safety and stability, not more tests, not more courtrooms. You may petition for future visitation, but only after a full investigation by Child Welfare Services and proof of completed counseling." The officers approached Gregory, their presence a silent warning. He sank into his chair, lips pressed in a white line, eyes dark with a mix of anger and loss. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged Eli tightly. Ranger barked once, a deep, joyous sound that broke the tension. As court adjourned, the news spread in seconds. Judge protects millionaire's son and K9 hero flashed across screens. Reporters clamored for a statement, but Mrs. Rodriguez shielded Eli, whisking him and Ranger out a side door into the rain. For the first time in his life, Eli felt the world open up, wide and frightening and beautiful. The future was uncertain. He would need to heal, to find his way in a world he barely knew. But he would not do it alone. At the foster home, Eli sat with Ranger in the backyard, watching the clouds break and a sliver of sun appear. Mrs. Green brought them hot chocolate and sat nearby. "You were so brave, Eli. Things will get easier now. There will be more questions, maybe more court days, but you don't have to face it alone." Eli looked at her, eyes still wary but hopeful. "Will Ranger always stay with me?" She nodded. "He's not just your dog now. He's your partner. He's family." Eli hugged Ranger close, tears sliding down his cheeks, this time from relief, not fear. But as the days passed, the world's attention grew. Paparazzi circled the foster home. Gregory's lawyers filed appeals. Internet trolls claimed Eli was lying. Even people from school sent messages, some supportive, some cruel. Eli struggled to trust. Every phone call, every letter felt like a threat. One night, as he and Ranger sat by the window, a shadow moved in the yard. Eli's breath caught. Ranger stood, ears forward, a low growl in his throat. A figure lingered near the fence, watching the house. Gregory wasn't done fighting, because even after justice, safety isn't guaranteed, and Eli's greatest test of courage and loyalty was still to come. Days blurred together in the small foster home. Reporters clustered outside the gate, their voices muffled by closed curtains and thick hedges. Eli rarely went outside, and when he did, Ranger was always glued to his side, an anchor against a world that felt colder and more confusing than ever. Gregory was relentless. Within a week, he had launched a media campaign. Glossy magazines published interviews with him, describing Eli as a troubled, confused boy, a victim of outside agitators and animal activists who had twisted a simple family misunderstanding into a scandal. "I just want my son home, safe and happy," Gregory said into every microphone. "This separation is breaking my heart." Supporters, some genuine, many paid, protested outside the courthouse, demanding justice for fathers. Strangers sent hateful letters to the foster home, blaming Eli for destroying his family's good name. At night, the phone rang with prank calls, and Mrs. Green took to unplugging it after dinner. But not everyone believed Gregory. A local animal welfare group started a fundraiser for Eli and Ranger. Anonymous packages arrived: books, letters of support, hand-knitted scarves, even artwork from children in neighboring schools. The principal wrote to Mrs. Green, offering Eli a place when he was ready. "You're braver than most adults I know," one note read, written in childish scrawl. Still, Eli felt trapped. In his dreams, the mansion's halls twisted into mazes. He ran endlessly, Ranger always just ahead, barking at dangers Eli couldn't see. Sometimes, Gregory's voice echoed after him, calm, persuasive, promising things would be better if only Eli came home and stopped lying. One afternoon, the social worker, Miss Patel, sat with Eli in the kitchen, Ranger curled under the table. "Gregory's lawyers are asking for supervised visits," she explained gently. "They're arguing it's in your best interest to reconnect." Eli shook his head so hard his hair flew. "I don't want to see him. Please don't make me." "Ms." Patel squeezed his hand. "No one can force you to do anything you're not ready for. The judge will listen to you." But the anxiety lingered. A week later, Mrs. Green returned from the mailbox with a letter in Gregory's handwriting. Eli refused to read it at first, but curiosity gnawed at him. With trembling hands, he unfolded the page. It was all apologies. Gregory begged forgiveness, wrote of missing his brave little man, promising that the bad days are behind us now. He ended with a chilling line: "A boy needs his father. Ranger will always be welcome in our home." Eli read it over and over, anger and doubt churning in his chest. He wanted to believe the promise. He wanted a father who could change, but he knew better. He ripped the letter up. That night, The local news ran a segment about America's bravest boy and his heroic K9. The comments online exploded with support, but also with threats. Send the mutt back to the shelter. That kid's making it all up. If I were his father, I'd sue everyone. Eli grew afraid again, not just of Gregory, but of the world's cruelty. Ranger sensed it. The dog followed Eli everywhere, sometimes refusing even to eat unless Eli was near. When the nightmares grew too much, Ranger would curl around Eli, his heartbeat slow and steady, grounding the boy back in the present. But Gregory's influence crept in more ways than one. One morning, Mrs. Green answered a call from a private investigator hired by Gregory's legal team. He demanded to know the foster home's schedule, citing concerns for Eli's welfare. Mrs. Green hung up, but Eli overheard, his fears blooming once more. Later that week, a car with tinted windows parked across the street for hours. Mrs. Patel increased security, and police patrols began circling the neighborhood. Eli became withdrawn. He stopped answering Mrs. Patel's questions, stopped writing in his journal. He clung to Ranger, barely speaking except to the dog. Mrs. Green worried. "He's going to break," she whispered to Miss Patel one night. "Gregory is pushing every button he can find. He knows how to get inside that boy's head." Still, Eli had Ranger, and that, for a while, was enough. Until one rainy evening, Eli heard a scratching at the back door. He opened it, expecting Mrs. Green or Ms. Patel. Instead, he found an envelope. Inside was a photo. It was Eli and Ranger at the park, from weeks ago, taken from a distance. On the back, scrawled in Gregory's handwriting, "We are always watching. Come home, Eli, or the dog pays the price." Eli's hands shook so hard he nearly dropped the photo. Ranger pressed against his leg, growling softly. And in that moment, Eli realized the battle was far from over. He wasn't just fighting for himself now, he was fighting for Ranger's life and the courage to stand up against the shadows that had followed him for so long. Eli sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the photo for what felt like hours. The rain outside tapped a frantic rhythm against the window pane, each drop sounding like footsteps in the hallways of his memory. Ranger rested his head on Eli's knee, eyes full of a patient, unwavering love. Eli's hands still trembled. He wanted to pretend the threat didn't matter, to tell Mrs. Green or Miss Patel to let the adults handle things. But deep down, he knew Gregory's reach extended farther than any lock or police patrol. He'd felt it his whole life. The invisible leash of fear tugged whenever Eli dared to hope for more. But Ranger was different. Ranger wasn't afraid. And somehow, when Eli looked at him, the fear inside shrank just enough to let something else through, a flicker of courage, faint but persistent. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He watched the moon crawl across the sky, his thoughts spinning. He remembered Mrs. Rodriguez's words, "You have people who believe you now," and Mrs. Green's tired but honest promise, "Things will get easier." But most of all, he remembered the feeling of Ranger's body shielding him, the weight of the dog's heartbeat steady against his own. By dawn, Eli knew what he had to do. He dressed quietly and slipped into the hallway, Ranger padding behind. Mrs. Green was already in the kitchen, eyes red from worry. When she saw Eli's face, she set down her mug. Did something happen? Eli handed her the photo. Her expression hardened as she read the message. "He can't keep doing this. It's harassment. I'll call the police." But Eli shook his head. "I want to talk, not just to you or Miss Patel, to everyone. The police, the judge, the news. I'm tired of being afraid. I want people to know what he's doing." Mrs. Green hesitated. "Are you sure?" Eli nodded. His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "He's not just hurting me anymore, he's threatening Ranger. He wants to make me feel helpless, but I'm not helpless. Not now." With Mrs. Green's help, Eli contacted Miss Patel, then Mrs. Rodriguez. Together, they called the detective in charge of Gregory's case. The police took the envelope, the photo, the note. Ms. Patel recorded Eli's statement, how the threats had never stopped, how the fear had followed him from mansion to foster home. And then, something changed. Eli agreed to a televised interview. No camera on his face, just his voice. But his words went out to the world. He talked about the years of silence, the punishments. The night ranger intervened. He talked about what it meant to feel truly safe, even for just a few hours, and how that safety shouldn't depend on luck or a single brave dog. The response was overwhelming. Support flooded in from across the country. Former staff from the mansion came forward, anonymously at first, then openly, describing what they'd seen and heard. A retired canine handler who'd trained Ranger gave a statement about the dog's temperament and heroism. The animal welfare group doubled their efforts, organizing a march for justice for Eli and Ranger. Gregory's campaign faltered. The public began to question his narrative. His allies fell silent, unwilling to risk their own reputations. But Gregory himself was still dangerous. He filed new motions, this time accusing Mrs. Green and Miss Patel of manipulating Eli, of staging evidence, of brainwashing his son. His lawyer tried to get Ranger removed from Eli's custody, citing emotional instability and potential risk. The next court hearing was scheduled for the following week. The stakes were higher than ever. If Gregory succeeded, Eli could lose Ranger forever, or worse, be forced back into his father's control. On the eve of the hearing, Eli sat with Ranger in the backyard, staring up at the stars peeking through the clouds. "I'm scared," he whispered. "But I'm not running away again. No more hiding." Ranger pressed closer as if to say, "Whatever comes, we face it together." Inside, Mrs. Green and Ms. Patel prepared documents and testimony. Mrs. Rodriguez worked the phones, rallying the community. The priest from the church prayed for strength and justice. Eli didn't sleep that night. He watched the moon set and the sky pale, heart pounding with fear and hope in equal measure. And as dawn broke, a car pulled up outside the foster home. This time it wasn't Gregory. It was a squad car, there to escort Eli and Ranger to court. The final battle was about to begin, and as Eli climbed into the back seat, Ranger pressed against his side. Eli finally understood. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing tall, even as the world tried to break you. The courthouse felt different this time. It wasn't the grandeur or the echoing marble that caught Eli's attention. It was the crowd. Journalists, supporters, activists, even strangers lined the halls, holding signs and banners. Justice for Eli. Protect K9 heroes. Children deserve safety. Eli held Ranger's leash tightly, the dog moving with unshakable calm at his side. Inside the courtroom, tension vibrated in the air. Gregory sat at the defense table, his suit crisp, his eyes cold. His legal team was bigger than ever. Mrs. Green, Miss Patel, Mrs. Rodriguez, and the priest all filled the front row behind Eli. The judge from the previous hearing presided, her gaze sharper than before. "Let's proceed," she said, her voice a calm anchor in the rising storm. Gregory's lawyer went first, presenting a mountain of documents. They argued that Eli was traumatized and easily influenced, that Ranger, though once a hero, was a risk in an unstable home. "Children need firm boundaries," the lawyer said, and Mr. Hartman only ever acted out of love and concern for his son's future. But something had shifted. The public attention, the outpouring of support, the new testimonies all chipped away at the narrative Gregory tried to sustain. Mrs. Green took the stand. She described the threats, the fear, the healing she'd witnessed in Eli only when Ranger was present. Ms. Patel testified to the repeated harassment, the surveillance, and Gregory's attempts to manipulate the system. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke last, her voice steady, but her hands trembling. "Eli isn't confused. He's brave. He risked everything to escape, and Ranger risked everything to protect him." Then it was the turn of the retired K9 handler. He described Ranger's years of training, his intelligence, his discipline, and, most importantly, his loyalty. "This dog saved lives in the line of duty. He's never shown aggression except to intervene when a child was in danger. Removing Ranger from Eli would be a punishment neither of them deserve." Finally, the judge turned to Eli. "Would you like to say something?" Eli's heart pounded so hard he thought it might stop. He rose, his voice small at first, but gaining strength as Ranger pressed gently against his leg. "I know I'm just a kid, but I know what's real. My father hurt me for years and no one believed me. Ranger did. He protected me when no one else would. I'm not making it up. And I don't want to go back. I just want to be safe. I just want Ranger to stay with me." The silence was deep, almost holy. Gregory's lawyer tried one last gambit. A letter from Gregory, read aloud in court. It was full of regret, apologies, promises to change. "Eli is my whole world. I miss him every day. I was strict, but I never meant to harm him." The judge listened, her expression unreadable. Then came the twist. A former housekeeper, who'd fled the mansion years before, appeared to testify. She described what she'd witnessed: bruises, nights of crying, the way staff were threatened into silence. Another neighbor, hearing the news, submitted security footage of Gregory yelling at Eli in the yard, dragging him inside by the arm. The evidence was now overwhelming. Gregory's mask began to crack. He raised his voice, angry, demanding to speak. The judge silenced him with a look. "Mr. Hartman, this is your final warning." As closing statements began, Eli's hands shook, but Ranger sat upright, unwavering, a living symbol of truth and loyalty. The lawyer for Eli closed simply, "Every child deserves to feel safe. Every animal that protects a child deserves to stay by their side. We ask the court to end this once and for all." The judge rose. "I am taking the afternoon to review the evidence. My ruling will be delivered tomorrow morning. Until then, Eli and Ranger will remain together in protective custody. This court is adjourned." The gavel sounded like a gunshot. Eli slumped, exhausted. He hugged Ranger, burying his face in the dog's fur. The courtroom emptied in a flurry of whispered hope and anxiety. Outside, reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs popping in the rain. Inside, Mrs. Green whispered, "You were so brave. Just one more night. Just one." But as they left, Gregory glared at Eli, his jaw clenched in a promise of revenge. Eli shivered, not from fear but from the final weight of waiting. That night, he and Ranger curled up together. No matter what happened tomorrow, Eli knew one thing: he had spoken the truth, and that was something no one, not even Gregory, could take away. The judge's decision would be final, and by dawn, Eli's life and Ranger's fate would be changed forever. Morning light filtered through the courthouse windows, turning the polished benches gold. Eli felt the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders as he entered the building with Mrs. Green, Ms. Patel, and Mrs. Rodriguez at his side. Ranger padded beside him, tail swishing softly, senses sharp to every sound. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the walls, the public gallery overflowing. Gregory sat rigid, eyes fixed on the judge's bench, his lawyers murmuring last-minute strategies. Eli squeezed Ranger's collar, heart in his throat. Judge Walker entered, and silence fell like a stone. She sat, flipping through the thick case file, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up, meeting first Eli's gaze, then Gregory's. "This has been a difficult case," she began, her voice steady and clear. "We have heard from many witnesses, reviewed extensive evidence, and witnessed remarkable courage from a young boy and his loyal companion." Eli barely breathed. "The law is meant to protect the vulnerable. No child should ever feel afraid in their own home. And no animal that protects a child from harm should be punished for that loyalty." Gregory's jaw clenched, hands gripping the table. The judge continued, "I am granting full guardianship of Eli Hartman to the state of California with immediate placement in a permanent foster care arrangement, subject to his wishes and continued oversight by Child Protective Services." Gregory sprang up, furious. "You can't do this. He's my son." Judge Walker's gavel rapped sharply. "Mr. Hartman, you have shown a pattern of abuse, intimidation, and dishonesty. Any attempt to contact Eli outside legal channels will result in criminal charges. You are to have no unsupervised contact until further review." Gregory's face drained of color. The court officer moved to his side, ready if he resisted. Judge Walker turned to Eli. "Eli, you may keep Ranger as your registered emotional support and service animal. The court recognizes his role in your safety and healing. No person, agency, or entity is to remove Ranger from your custody unless ordered by this court." Eli felt tears sting his eyes, relief and joy flooding through him so quickly it made him dizzy. Mrs. Green pulled him into a hug. Ranger barked, a deep, resonant sound that made everyone in the courtroom smile. The judge finished. "Let it be entered into the record that this court commends the bravery of Eli Hartman and the heroism of Ranger, whose loyalty reminds us all that compassion is not limited to human beings." Reporters rushed out to break the news. Abused son wins freedom. Hero dog to stay by his side. Gregory's lawyers filed out, defeated. Gregory himself was escorted away, face twisted in bitterness, yet strangely small and powerless. The gallery erupted in applause, something rarely seen in a court of law, but no one stopped them. Mrs. Rodriguez cried openly, hugging Eli. Ms. Patel smiled through tears. The priest blessed them both, voice shaking with emotion. Eli stood in the center of it all, a little stunned, clutching Ranger as if to anchor himself to reality. He felt new, as if the sun was warmer, the air cleaner, his own heart finally his. Outside, cameras flashed, but Mrs. Green shielded him. They slipped through a side door, emerging into the brightness of a world that suddenly seemed full of possibility. Back at the foster home, there was a celebration. The animal welfare group brought a cake. The police chief stopped by to thank Ranger with a new collar, blue leather embossed with the words "Hero Forever." Letters poured in from strangers, classmates, even people who'd once turned away. But that night, alone with Ranger, Eli let himself feel everything. The fear, the relief, the gratitude, and, finally, hope. He sat in the garden, Ranger's head in his lap, stars bright above them. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it. We're really free." Ranger looked up, tail wagging gently, eyes shining with trust. Inside, Mrs. Green watched from the window, a hand pressed to her heart. "You saved him, old friend," she whispered. "But you saved all of us, too." Still, as quiet settled, Eli knew healing wouldn't be simple. The nightmares might return. There would be scars, inside and out. But he was no longer alone. He had his voice, he had a future, he had Ranger. And just as he closed his eyes, a single thought carried him into sleep. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe that tomorrow might finally be better. The first morning of freedom was different from anything Eli had ever known. Sunlight poured through the window in thick, golden beams, filling his new bedroom with warmth. He woke slowly, blinking at the quiet. No heavy footsteps, no shouts, no dread. Only Ranger, still snoring gently at the foot of his bed, tail twitching in a dream. For the first time in years, Eli let himself stretch, yawn, and just be. He wandered into the kitchen in his socks, hair wild, heart light. Mrs. Green was humming as she poured coffee, the radio playing soft music. She smiled when she saw him, her eyes crinkling in the corners. "Good morning, Eli," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Eli grinned shyly. "Good morning." Ranger trotted in, nudged his nose into Eli's hand, then sat on his feet as if claiming him for good. Mrs. Green placed a plate of pancakes on the table, tall, syrupy, steaming. Eli ate slowly, savoring each bite. Ranger licked a plate clean after, earning a gentle laugh from both of them. After breakfast, they took a walk through the neighborhood. For the first time, Eli didn't hide his face. He saw the world with new eyes, trees shimmering with dew, birds gossiping in the branches, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring. Neighbors waved. Some offered shy smiles, others clapped softly as they passed. Word had spread. Eli and Ranger were local heroes now. At the park, children approached with their own dogs. They wanted to meet the hero, but Eli was still shy. He knelt beside Ranger, letting the dog take the spotlight. Ranger loved every moment, wagging, sniffing, rolling in the grass, basking in the affection. For once, the stares felt like acceptance, not scrutiny. Eli sat beneath a tree, Ranger at his side, and watched the world spin on, beautiful, messy, and new. For the first time, he felt the weight inside his chest begin to lift. He remembered the days locked in his room, the belt, the bruises, the silence. But those memories seemed smaller, like shadows fading at noon. Later, back at home, Mrs. Green unpacked a stack of letters. There were cards from classmates, some apologizing for never asking if he was okay, others just saying, "We're proud of you." One note, written in crayon, read, "You're braver than Superman." Eli smiled, showing Ranger each letter. The dog sniffed them dutifully, tail thumping. That afternoon, Miss Patel and Mrs. Rodriguez arrived. They brought news. The animal welfare group had set up a fund for Ranger's care, and the police wanted to recognize Eli and his dog at an upcoming community event. For a moment, Eli hesitated, his old shyness threatening to take over. But Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed his hand. "You did something that helped other kids. You can help more just by being yourself." Eli thought about it, about the hundreds of kids he'd seen on TV, faces blurred, stories never told, about what it felt like to believe no one would ever come. He nodded. "Okay, I'll go, but only if Ranger gets the first medal." They all laughed, a real, honest laugh, one that filled the house. As evening fell, Eli and Ranger curled up on the back porch, watching the sky turn violet and then midnight blue. Crickets chirped, lights flickered on in distant windows. Mrs. Green brought out a plate of cookies and a mug of warm milk. Eli broke a piece for Ranger, who accepted it with a gentle mouth and sparkling eyes. Eli leaned back, feeling the dog's heartbeat under his palm. He whispered, "Thank you, Ranger, for everything." Ranger pressed closer, eyes closing in peace. For the first time, Eli wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. He wasn't holding his breath or shrinking from the world. He was simply here, alive, loved, safe. He glanced at the door and saw Mrs. Green watching, her face shining with quiet pride. Miss Patel sat nearby, chatting softly with Mrs. Rodriguez. There were no secrets here, no fear, just the sound of his own laughter mixing with the world's gentle promise. "This is home now. This is yours." And as the stars appeared, Eli knew he and Ranger had not only survived, they had won. Tomorrow, for the first time, Eli would stand in front of a crowd, not as a victim, but as a survivor, side by side with the only friend who had never abandoned him. The weeks that followed became a blur of first times. Eli went to school with Ranger trotting beside him, head held high, a blue hero collar glinting in the sunlight. At first, the other students kept their distance, unsure how to approach the boy whose story had spread across town, but it didn't last. Ranger's easy friendliness broke every wall. Children gathered, drawn in by the dog's calm and the way he never left Eli's side. For the first time, Eli found friends not because he was a curiosity, but because of who he was. Quiet, yes, shy sometimes, but steady. He began to speak up in class, to share ideas, to help other kids with homework. Sometimes he even smiled, real smiles that reached his eyes. Ranger became a local legend. At the community event, the chief of police pinned a medal on his collar and handed Eli a certificate of bravery. Cameras flashed. For a moment, Eli froze, the old fear rising. But when he looked out at the crowd, at Mrs. Green, Miss Patel, Mrs. Rodriguez, and all the classmates and neighbors cheering, he stood taller. He squeezed Ranger's fur, whispered, "Thank you," and took a deep breath. He spoke, "My dog saved me, not just from my father, but from being alone, from being afraid. He showed me what it means to be loyal, to protect someone no matter what." There was silence, then applause. Real, honest, joyful. After the ceremony, a girl his age came up and slipped him a note. "If you ever need a friend, I'm here, I believe you." Eli tucked it into his pocket, warmth blossoming in his chest. Life did not magically become easy. There were still bad dreams, rough days, moments when he startled at sudden noises or flinched from loud voices. But now, those moments were met with understanding, not judgment. Ranger would nudge him, steady and calm. Mrs. Green would sit beside him until the fear passed. His new friends learned how to help, not by fixing everything, but by simply being present. Slowly, the world became safe. One day at a time, Eli began writing about his journey, at first for himself, then for others. He and Ms. Patel started a group at school for kids who needed someone to listen. Ranger, of course, became the club's mascot, lying at everyone's feet during their meetings, collecting stories in exchange for belly rubs. Sometimes Eli wondered about his father. Gregory was facing charges and mandatory counseling, barred from seeing Eli without supervision. There was anger still and grief, but it was not all-consuming anymore. Eli realized forgiveness was not about letting Gregory off the hook, but about freeing himself from the grip of that pain. He learned to trust, to laugh, to hope again. The day came when Eli and Ranger returned to the church where everything had changed. Mrs. Rodriguez waited for them, smiling with tears in her eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered, hugging Eli tightly. "You're home." Eli looked at Ranger, then at the sky, and felt a quiet peace settle over him. He had come full circle, from silence to voice, from fear to freedom, from being invisible to being seen, and always, at the center, the unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. And now a message for you, the listener. If you're watching this and you feel alone, unheard or afraid, know that there is hope. Sometimes it takes just one act of courage, one person who listens, one friend, human or animal, to change everything. Don't let anyone tell you that your pain isn't real or that you have to go through it alone. Speak up, ask for help. Trust that there are people out there like Mrs. Green, Miss Patel, Mrs. Rodriguez, and the many others in Eli's story who care and will stand by you. And never underestimate the love and loyalty of a dog. Ranger reminds us all that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they have paws and fur and eyes that see right into your soul. So if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to our channel for more true, emotional stories like this. Leave a comment below if you want to thank Ranger, or to share your own story of courage and friendship. You never know whose life you might touch. And remember, the bravest thing you can do is to keep believing in tomorrow, because freedom is possible, healing is possible, and sometimes a second chance is just waiting for you at the door, tail wagging, eyes shining, ready to walk into the light by your side. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other. If you want more inspiring stories, don't forget to subscribe and check out our next video here on the channel.